Welcome to a special edition of The Point of View, coming to you from the Ashesi University campus at Brekusu. My guest is the founder and president of Ashesi University, a vision he nurtured, sowed the seeds 22 years ago somewhere in Laboni. And today we are here at the magnificent campus to reflect on education, leadership, and nation building. Patrick Awuah is talking to us. When we come back, stay with us. Welcome back. So today I'm here at Ashesi University to talk to Patrick Awuah, who founded Ashesi University in 2002. We're here to talk about education, leadership, and the project of training the next generation of Africa's ethical leaders. Patrick, thanks for having us.
Bernard, it's great to have you here, and it's great to be on your show.
I've seen so much progress here. The campus is looking nice. 22 years. Your reflections on how far you've come since we left Laboni.
So it's interesting you ask that question, because on day one, when we started in Laboni, we had a vision of what this campus would look like. We, in fact, had architectural conceptual drawings,
Wow.
if you remember. And today, 22 years later, the campus is bigger than that concept that we had drawn up at the very beginning. And it's growing from there. So from a physical infrastructure point of view, we've gone beyond the initial plan that we had. In terms of the culture we wanted to build at the university and the outcomes that we wanted for our students and the kind of education we wanted to implement here, I would say that we've pretty much implemented and executed as planned. And Ashesi is on the path that we envisioned for it. However, I hesitate to say we've arrived at some destination, because for us, it's a journey. In fact, our name means beginning. The
Ashesi.
idea is Ashesi means beginning in Fanti. We want every year that our managers, our students, our faculty see every moment as a new beginning for the institution. So that's how I would characterize where we are today.
We know some of the story around studying in Ghana, going to the US, working at Microsoft, making money, thinking back about what you can do for the continent. But why education? You could have built hospitals. You could have designed computers. You could have formed a political party because you want to help your continent. So why the education route?
Well, education and higher education in particular was because I felt that the leaders of our society are the people who, among a very small cohort in their group, had the opportunity to get higher education. So the mindsets of the leadership of a country, the professional capabilities, the purpose that they have is formed in our university classrooms and labs and in the halls. And I felt that we needed to engage that cohort in a very intentional and strong way. So that's why I chose education. And if you think about it, the people who will design our infrastructure, who will plan the infrastructure, design the urban environment, formulate policies, run hospitals, all of those people have gone through higher education. And so the nature of what you do in a university is very critical for the future of a society. And that's why I felt if we engage this is an area that it's a lever that you pull that affects many other things.
When you set out to do this in the early 2000s, the world was a very different place. I'll give you a few examples. So the biggest companies in the world were still in extractives or in automobile. Now, the biggest companies in the world are in the network, value added. So we're talking companies that are in the cloud, that are in technology.
Right.
Of course, the president of the US at the time was Bush Jr. Now we have Trump. But we also had you could say a much older world. Now we have a much younger continent. A lot of things have changed in 22 years. So the question is, does the kind of leader you need to train, has that type of person changed? Or that problem you're trying to solve 22 years ago, is it still the same kind of solution you're going to use?
I think it's the same solution that you need, but the demands of future leaders are going to be greater. So let's look at Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, Ghana had a population of maybe 7 million people. Okay. Today, Ghana is 30 million people. 30 years from now, Ghana is going to be closer to 60 million people. So in my lifetime, Ghana's population would have grown by a factor of 10. Okay. The infrastructure we need, if we grew it by a factor of 10 from when I was a kid, then we're standing still. The hospitals, the courts, everything, the schools. So the future leaders, the people who will be running Ghana 20 years from now, 30 years from now, will be dealing with much bigger challenges and will be confronting much bigger opportunities. Okay. However, the fundamentals of society remain the same. I'll describe one of the fundamentals. One of the fundamentals in a society is trust. It's social capital. If you don't have social capital, it's very difficult to build other kinds of capital. It's hard to build physical capital, financial capital, intellectual capital. So what is social capital? Imagine two societies. There's one society where there's zero trust because everybody is corrupt. Everybody steals, everybody lies. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Kids are stealing from their parents are stealing from their kids. And a second society where everybody's honest. Okay, and let's compare these two societies. The first society has zero social capital. Those people cannot get together to build a school. They cannot get together even to raise kids. They cannot get together to build a farm. They cannot get together to go hunt. Okay? They certainly cannot build a modern state. The second example, where there's 100% trust, very high trust, they can move very quickly. They don't even need to write contracts. They don't need a police force. Mm-hmm. Everybody's just productive. Everybody's helping each other. So that's the mental thing. Whether you are a society of 6 million people or 60 million people, the challenge is harder if you're 60 million people. 60 million people who don't trust each other is a very, very tough place. Okay. That's why I say it's still the same solution. It's still you're educating for mindsets, for capabilities, for character and skills, right? And we need to do it with a sense of urgency.
Why is tertiary education or higher education you sort of alluded to that, but why is that the entry point? Because some will say by the time they get here, the software may have already been corrupted.
That's correct.
It's a much more difficult job. So just talk to me about the importance of higher education in this conversation.
So I think of this as a systems problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ecosystem problem. Think about who teaches in a primary school, who teaches in a secondary school, who manages the Ministry of Education. Those people have had a tertiary education. They've gone to a teacher training college. They've gone to a college where they've learned public policy or management. So what happens in tertiary education affects what happens earlier on in the educational system. And then those earlier on in the educational system will be a pipeline into tertiary education. So it's a cycle. There's a very strong feedback connection. So I completely agree with the premise of your question that there needs to be very serious work being done at the lower levels of education as well. I chose higher education in part because I was thinking of this, sort of answering the question, what can I as an individual do that can have a big impact? If you want to engage primary education and have a big impact, a really big impact, it's not just about setting up one school. You should be in the Ministry of Education. You should be working at the level where you're engaged directly with millions of children at the same time. And so you need to have the force of state behind you. And I didn't have the force of state behind me. It was just me, my network of, professional colleagues that I had at Microsoft. And so I sort of designed and envisioned something that I felt that me and my network could actually make a meaningful contribution.
We're talking to Patrick Awuah, founder and president of Ashesi University, basically reflecting on 22 years of trying to solve the national problem using the education route. I just wanted to ask around the funnel, because we are a few days to elections and the subject of free education is still very big, right, where the issue of access and quality have come up. Two in one question. Do you understand the way the debate is going, or how the free education debate has gone? And how should that conversation be framed? Because it seems as if, well, somebody says, I'm going to give free education. Somebody says, well, we don't want free. We want, because quality is compromised. So it's almost like those are the two tensions, right? But what do you think we should emphasize when it comes to the issue of secondary education?
So first of all, let me just say that the notion that you should educate everybody up through secondary education is correct. Mm-hmm. And it is why it's in our constitution that education should be progressively free through secondary education. There's a very strong correlation between the GDP of countries and the percentage of people who've gone through secondary education. It's a very high correlation. Mm-hmm. If everybody's getting a good secondary education, your GDP growth is going to be stronger than if you don't have that. Okay. Now, the way the conversation has happened in Ghana and decisions have been made in Ghana, in my view, there's not been enough patience and there's not been enough sort of sharing of ideas and trying to come up with a consensus. So the debate that was happening, say, 10 years ago, about should we do it now or not, that was a valid debate. As you probably know, I was one of those at the time of the debate who was saying you should take a gradual approach. You should say, okay, here's a plan of what we're going to do 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now, 8 years from now. And you sort of actually live by the constitution as a progressively free, and you do a 10-year plan of how you're going to get there and get there. So that's sort of my style. Now, it happened all at once. And when it happens all at once, there's some positives that come from that, and there's some difficulties that come from that. Mm-hmm. Now we're 10 years in. I think that the conversation about that we were having 10 years ago is not the conversation we should be having today. Today, we have kids in the classrooms. You cannot tomorrow dismantle free SHS. This is just, it's not something that should even be part of the conversation. What you can do tomorrow is to say, okay, everybody's in the classrooms. what should we be doing to improve quality for all these children who are today now in the classroom? That should be the entire focus of the conversation. Okay. How do we get resources into it? What do we need to do to get quality up? And how do we work within the constraints that we have, and there's significant financial constraints, to optimize high performance? That's the question we should be having.
So irrespective of which party we belong to, the basic point is now we want better quality. Now we want to make the students who are in school have a better chance of developing the four things you said: mindset, capability, character, and skills.
Right.
That should be the focus.
That should be entire focus on both sides. Actually, in all parties.
Interesting. Let's talk about politics and how it affects everything. And I use politics, but I'm talking leadership now.
Right.
Because you're also trying to train or raise leaders. All right.
Right.
And earlier in the day, we discussed citizenship leadership, and there was some sort of consensus that a good citizen becomes a good leader. So we must tackle the citizenship question first. But when you explain why you chose tertiary education, my understanding is that because you don't have a lot of time, you target the middle of the system. Because you're basically saying, if I want to multiply leadership, I must train leaders.
Right.
Because these are the guys who will bring the change.
Right.
I may not have time to start from all the followership. All right. So talk to me a bit about your leadership philosophy and how we can get better quality political leaders, economic leaders, social leaders. How can we get better quality leaders at the national and then continental level?
Okay. So I think we talk about leadership a lot, but if you look at the core values of Ashesi, we say scholarship, leadership, and citizenship. In fact, when we don't say leadership first, we say scholarship. The notion is a good leader is also, to be a good leader, you must be a good citizen, and you must be someone who's willing to learn for the rest of your life. The minute a leader stops learning, stops listening, stops imagining, that leader starts to atrophy and their impact starts to atrophy. So we think of this as we're educating citizen leaders. It's not people who are going to get a title, but it's people who are exhibiting leadership. Now, somebody who graduates from a university, their first job, unless they start their own business, they're not the CEO in the first job that they enter. But we still expect them to exhibit leadership in that role of joining a team because they're helping that team be more effective, right? They're being a good team player. Okay. So I don't, in my mind, separate leadership from citizenship or good citizenship. It's all the same thing. The other thing is we also think of leadership as not just the politicians, it's everybody. Let me explain. So when I like, you have a phone, this phone is indicative of somebody's engineering. Okay. So there's some engineering that's happened at places like Stanford and MIT and Harvard and other places that is in this technology that we're using today. If you go to Switzerland and you're on a train, you're experiencing engineering from ETH Zurich. If you go to Seattle and you're driving on a road, you're experiencing engineering from the University of Washington. When you're in Ghana and you're on a road and you hit a pothole, you're experiencing engineering from KNUST and some of the polytechnics, correct?
Yeah.
And you're experiencing management that's come out of the University of Ghana. And I use these two schools because they're the two oldest. When you walk into a classroom and you see a certain kind of teaching happening, you're experiencing UCC education. Okay. And so in that sense, the people who went to KNUST, the people who are teaching those students, the people who are teaching at University of Ghana, at UCC, are leaders of our society. They literally affect our built environment. They affect the experience of citizens as they move through this country. They affect the experience of citizens when they go into a hospital. That is leadership. And so that's how we think about it. But you could also say all of those guys are also citizens, right?
I think that's brilliant. So it works together.
Yes.
And it's the angle you're coming from. And that helps because as a radio show host, a lot of times people talk about politicians.
Right.
And yes, politicians can do a lot of good or bad, but they don't see the engineer or the teacher or the manager as a very key part of the experience of Ghana that they have.
Right.
Because they think it's only at the political level that you can make change. And that does not say politicians are not important. But I think it changes the way you see agency and it changes the way you see responsibility.
Absolutely. And I like that you use the word agency.
Yeah.
Who has agency to fix Ghana's problems? Who has the agency to stop corruption? Who has the agency to make sure roads are designed and built and budgeted for correctly? It's the people who have had the most education in our country. And so when we're engaging with those people, that's a perspective that we should have.
The point of view is talking to Patrick Awuah, and we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll try and understand briefly from him how this journey is changing him. Of course, it's not easy to build an institution from scratch, grow leaders with it, and try and make it outlive you. We'll deal with that briefly when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight, we're talking to Patrick Awuah Jr. A lot of people forget the junior. Who's the founder and president of Ashesi University. We're here at Brekusu, basically reflecting on education and leadership, nation building. Is this the most difficult thing you've done?
It is. It is by far the most difficult thing I've done professionally. But I would say that parenthood is also
Tough.
Been quite a challenge.
I'm thinking on the professional side because you're working in Microsoft, you're engineering, building the future, doing very well. And now you're building an institution from the beginning.
Right.
As against being president of a university that already exists.
Right.
Talk to me about the difference because it seems to me you're building infrastructure, you're creating programs, you're hiring people.
Right.
You're trying to create culture.
Right.
You're working. It's a lot of things. As against, I'm president of Harvard and this is a template and this is a legacy to maintain. How different is it to be leading in this kind of arrangement?
Well, there are pluses and minuses. So my professional experience, I did national service at St. Mary's. I worked at Microsoft and I did this. At Microsoft, there's somebody else responsible for running the whole company. I mean, there's Bill Gates. He's very smart. He has a very strong team. It was a lot of work at Microsoft. We worked very, very hard. I mean, a 12-hour day was just sort of standard at the time I was there. So it wasn't easy. We had very strong teams. And it was a very desirable company to work for. So if they had an open position, they literally had thousands of applications and they could select the best people. Okay. Now, at Ashesi, I am responsible. I'm responsible for managing a team. I'm responsible for raising the funds. I'm responsible for the visioning, formulating strategy, working with the board, gathering resources, and then managing the execution. So as you say, it is the difficulty of starting something from scratch. But I also appreciate that when you start something from scratch, you're starting with a blank sheet, and it gives you certain freedoms that somebody who's joining another organization does not have. So the president of Harvard is stepping into an organization that's very well established. They do not set the culture of Harvard. It's already set. If it's a good, positive culture, great. If it's not, then they're in a tough place, right? Here, I was setting culture. I was working with a small team. And the way to do it is to start small and grow and learn along the way, which is what we've done at Ashesi.
What's your philosophy about people? So how do you get the right people to work for you? I say this because my experience with your team, you have some very loyal people, committed, excellent people who work very hard.
Yes.
How did you make them that way, or you found them?
It's a combination, right? So we're looking for people who are smart, who are driven, who buy into our vision and the mission of what we're trying to accomplish. And when they get here, we treat them with respect. And, one of the things that's very important to me is that everybody should understand how they fit into the larger mission. And, this is not an idea I came up with myself. I'd read a book about some of these great cathedrals that have been built in Europe, some of which took hundreds of years to build. And you would read about people who are masons laying bricks. That's what they do. They lay bricks. Okay. And you'd ask them, what is your job? And their answer would be, I'm building a cathedral. They don't say, I'm laying bricks. They're building a cathedral. So that tells you that they understand the larger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what motivates them. And so we try to have a team that is like that. We are educating the future leaders of our country. It is a very serious mission, right? We're not just teaching a course or painting a building or fixing furniture or organizing events. We are here to create an environment and provide a service that is quite literally going to affect the future of our country. And if your team really truly thinks like that, you see a very different level of engagement within the members of that team.
Culture is something you can't see physically, but you can perceive.
You can feel it.
So how do you know? And my mind is moving in many ways because I can sense a certain culture when I enter. There's excellence, and you see it in the ambience. There's respect. I don't see people talking over each other. So in asking questions, people raise their hand. So there's sort of respect. I didn't hear a lot of shouting.
Right.
I didn't hear a lot of shouting. And yet there was vibrancy in the room. And then I see a bit of egalitarianism where everybody's queuing for their food, including the president.
Right.
So even though you are the boss, I didn't discern your power when you entered the room, I didn't see people scatter.
Right.
But there was a difference.
Right.
So this is what I perceive. It's taking you 20 years to do this. Let's come to a country.
Yeah.
And let's use the analogy you did. So Kwame Nkrumah started, probably he was you are the Kwame Nkrumah of Ashesi. All right. But now people who followed Nkrumah, the culture is getting set. So it's going to be very difficult. So I'm trying to basically say, maybe our national political leaders have a much tougher job than we think, in terms of there is a certain way of doing things and thinking which has been calcified over maybe 60 years. And we expect them to change the country in 4 years. maybe we have to manage our expectations.
Yes and no. So, I've been talking to somebody who visits Benin quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when she describes to me what is happening in Benin today, under a leader who's been there, I think 6 years, it is just phenomenal, right? Within 6 years, Benin is moving in a very energetic way, like more energetically than Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
They have far fewer resources. They have a much smaller market. They don't speak a language that is a language of global commerce. And yet they're moving. I don't know if you've been to Kigali, to Rwanda. I've been to Rwanda maybe 5 or 6 times. Most of the time I was in Kigali. On one visit, we went out into the rural areas, and it is very impressive how energetically Rwanda is moving. I would say that I see advances there that I don't see here in Ghana. Now, how does one achieve that? I mean, you could say that in the case of Rwanda, they had a major national crisis, and a leader emerged out of that, who had a certain force of personality and certain power to move the needle. But that's not what's happening in Benin. It's democratically elected government. And they're executing sort of within that same kind of regime that we have here. I think it starts with who are the people who are around the political leaders, the presidency. We have a proverb actually that says that there's no such thing as a bad chief. What you have, but you can have bad advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And I partly agree with that. I think that a chief that surrounds himself with bad leaders has been a bad leader. Okay. But a chief that surrounds himself with good advisors has been a good leader, and those advisors then help great leadership. And so the way I look at this, on the one hand, I'm driving a culture at Ashesi, but everybody who works here, or most of the people who work here, were educated not at Ashesi. And they've worked at other companies that had different cultures. So they've come with some of them had come with a different mindset. And if you really want to change things, you have to hold the people around you accountable to begin with. You have a team of, say, 10 people. Those 10 people have certain things they're supposed to execute, and you hold them accountable to it. And they hold the next line accountable, and they hold the next line accountable. So leaders can always make change. Now, some change will take time, but if you don't start making that change now, then it never happens.
My last question is, what do you want your legacy to be? And let me qualify that, because I know some people, when they leave the scene, they leave a lot of property, buildings, projects. Some people leave great people they've educated. So I think you've done both of that. So I'm asking more in relation to what principles, what does Patrick want to be known for as what he stood for?
Well, I think what I stand for, what I try to do, is to be someone who executes with a lot of diligence, a lot of integrity, and respect for my fellow human being, right? So I try to see everybody as equal. We're all people. Yes, some people may have a physical disability so that they have to be in a wheelchair. Some people may have hearing impairment. Some people will be men, some people will be women, but ultimately we're all people. And if we try to build people and we try to build a high trust society, build social capital, then you lift everyone up. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And thanks for hosting us. We've been talking to Patrick Awuah Jr., founder and president of Ashesi University, on education, citizenship, leadership, and nation building. Hope you've learned something new. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. When the president was being sworn in, he said we should be citizens and not spectators. So a lot of people started thinking about who a citizen is. But I sense people see citizenship from a point of the right to vote, having a Ghana card, and calling myself a Ghanaian. But I, from what you've said to me in the past, that's not who a citizen is, right? So, Bridget, explain your concept of who a citizen is and why many Ghanaians are not being citizens. They're basically just being spectators.
Well, I don't know whether it comes from our history and a certain fear to speak up, but a citizen should be bold enough to say what they want and also do or take some responsibility. I am sure that if I ask among, and I've had the opportunity to speak to students, I've asked them, how many of you are actually registered to vote? And few hands will go up.
You can try that here.
Well, how many of you have a voter's ID?
That's a good 55%.
50%.
No, let's ask the question. How many of you are registered to vote in this election? It's above average. It's not about 60%, probably more.
Is that good enough, though? Well,
they're not all Ghanaians.
They are not all Ghanaians.
Okay. How many of you are citizens registered to vote in your country?
Yes.
So let's see the hands again, just to be sure. No, okay, so these are then those who didn't raise their hands earlier. All right.
The other question I ask is, how many of you voted in your local level elections?
1, 2, 3. Oh, Lord.
Yes. This is it. And that is what it takes to be a citizen. That is what it takes when you live in a certain locale to find out who the assembly person is, or to say, I want to be the assembly person of this place. And when it comes to, if you won't be, support whoever wants to be. Yes. And if you won't support the person, go and vote, at least. Make a decision. Be involved in the local governance of your community. And take it from there. Take it the next step. Be concerned when you walk around and see things that are not right. And speak up about it. And it doesn't matter that it's speaking against someone you know, or someone, your uncle or your... It's about your principles and your values. And I heard Patrick say something about principles. I think that we have so much gone against our values and our principles in support of our political parties. We've become political people or partisan people rather than citizens. And that is where we have to change it. You must, it's country first.
All right.
Before whatever political party, if you like, you want to belong.
Thank you, Bridget. Kojo, your take on citizenship?
Just maybe something that Bridget said about partisanship and citizenship. I don't think it actually should be, one should be positive, one should be negative.
All right.
That's the thing that I think has grown. We've sort of turned everything that's good into a very bad thing, because what are political parties established to do? They're supposed to aggregate our interests so that, in a democracy, it's not Athenian democracy where everybody's standing in the market and saying one thing or the other. It's a way of organizing citizens to be able to, put some idea out there. Now, somehow that has become almost the excuse for anything that you can do, if you are part of a party that is negative, that is even anti-state, anti-government. I don't. For me, parties are supposed to be positive in a democracy. For me, citizenship imposes a certain bundle of rights and responsibilities. It's a term of art. Okay. If you say you are a citizen, there are certain rights that accrue to you that you get to exercise the same way you have duties. So for any democratic society to thrive, you have to have active citizens who are aware of their rights, but also aware of their responsibilities, and actually exercise them on a daily basis. If that is missing, then you have a problem. So Afrobarometer shows that, for example, yes, in Ghana we are doing 70% on average that people go to vote. But when it comes to protests, it's about 10% of people that will go and protest on an issue.
Wow.
Maybe even lower, people who write to their MPs or do any kind of citizenship type things that is supposed to make a democracy, thrive and work. So I don't think we are alive to our roles as citizens. We think that when we go and vote,
we've done our work.
The government that we elect should govern, and we'll get our bread and our water.
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. You have to almost be on that government from day one to the next election to make sure that you actually get the bread and the water. Wonderful. And I think that gap is what we have to fill.
Thank you. Mami, your thoughts on citizenship?
Okay, so imagine we have a house, and there are 3 adults in the house. We're not going to introduce them. There's a plate of cookies on the table, and there's also a tap that's running in the sink in the kitchen. It's just running. It's just wasting. Water's going away. One of them comes, sees the cookies, and says, "Oh, they don't know if they can take it, so they're just going to wait and see." And they don't really want to spoil anything, so they sit down. They don't touch the tap. They don't touch the cookies. And then the second person comes in and eats a bunch of cookies and sees the tap and is like, "Oh, I'm sitting down, I'm comfortable, I can't get up. How much will it cost?" And then a third person comes in, the third adult comes in, sees the cookies, takes the cookie, then hears the water and says, "Oh, I can't waste this water, my bills will go up," and goes to turn off the water. Who owns the house? Which of these 3 people owns the house? That's the citizen. Wow. The person who both knows their rights and their responsibilities. The one who cares when the water is wasting because they know the bill is theirs. That's a citizen. Wow. The country is our house. Whether it goes well or not depends on how much we're willing to give to it. So if we will let the water run, then we can walk around saying, "Oh yes, we own a house," but we're not actually invested in that house. A citizen is invested in their country. Wow. And so like Kojo was saying, there are duties. And the duties are not simply to be in an electoral queue. Although we respect that, because sometimes you can be in the queue for 4 hours. We respect that. But that's not it. It's knowing who you're supposed to be asking the questions to and asking them and waiting for their answers and telling them, "You didn't give me an answer the last time I asked," and writing to your MP. And no, your MP should not be out of your country for 6 months and you don't know this. You don't even know this. A real citizen protects their home, enjoys their rights, but protects their home.
I love this. Come on, guys, this is awesome. So the question is, are you eating the cookie? Are you watching television or putting off the tap? I think the question would ask. That was a brilliant illustration. So as a student, by the way, have you registered to vote? And put you on the spot there. What are your thoughts on citizenship? Because I like the rights, responsibility kind of thing. Do you feel treated as a citizen in Ghana? Do you get to enjoy the rights? And do you understand your responsibility? Can you share a little around how you conceptualize your citizenship, Amma?
Okay, thank you. So definitely my rights are not being infringed upon in any way I'm aware of. Okay. So yes, I consider myself a citizen enjoying my full rights.
Your cookies.
The rights I'm well aware of. So they've said a lot, and it's true. Citizenship is about your rights and as well as your responsibilities. So as a young person and a student, I have responsibilities just like any other citizen, but I have a privilege, sort of, because it was mentioned how some people grew up not having the kind of citizenship I have right now. So that means greater responsibility for me and people in my demographic. And you give the statistics of the people who do not want to vote right now in the country, and I happen to be part of that statistic. So the question is, why? And it's a lot of things. Nobody can make it set in stone. I think the Afrobarometer statistics talks to it, the perception about corruption and all of that. But I think beyond that, as a young person, I'm responsible for my community. In as much as I'm responsible for myself, I want to do well in life, but I also have to make sure my community also does well. So how do I realize that kind of citizenship? It is by looking at what is important to me in my community and then speaking to it, working towards it. I like that they said emailing your MP, writing to them and all of that. But I think as young people, we need to feel empowered about what we also can do towards our responsibility. So if there is something wrong in a community that we can fix with our skills and little resources, can we improvise with something available in the community to solve this problem? I think young people today, like myself, are empowered to kind of do that. So for example, if you're a mechanical engineering student and there happens to be a bridge not functioning well in your community and it's just about putting nails and wood together to make it work, I don't think you really need to talk to your assemblyman. I mean, you can let them know what you want to do, but I think taking charge of certain things are one of the ways as a young person I can really realize my citizenship in terms of my responsibilities.
Let me press you a bit. Do you see this happening in your community? For example, here, do you have people who volunteer to go teach? So, for example, we say some kids in a community, they are not well educated, they're dropping out of school. Does the curriculum here or the leadership program here encourage, and do you see the citizens here, beyond complaining to the MP, go and actually solve a problem?
Well, at Ashesi, it looks like whether you like it or not, when you do Leadership 4, you have to go out there and help solve a problem. And it is mandated, but then I think based on the essence of it, you understanding its importance, some students go out of their way, even after the Leadership 4 series, to continue volunteering. So there are currently initiatives run by students, led by students, where in the Brekusu community, which is where we are right now, we live here till vacation, so we are part of this community. People go out there and then effect change in any way they see possible.
Wonderful.
With their resources.
Just last question to you. So that group of 18 to 29 who say they won't vote, you understand it better than the rest of us on the panel. What do you know why? Because I was surprised that the first time I voted was the year 2000. I was very eager to vote because this was the first time I was going to get the chance to choose a president and an MP. And then the surveys are saying, by the way, this is not just Afrobarometer. The NCC survey corroborates this, that the largest group of I won't vote were 18 to 29. And that was shocking. Is it that the rest of us misunderstand these guys? Is it that we are speaking a different language? Why on earth will people of your age group say that even the basic thing, the voting that Bridget says is not enough, even that you don't want to do it? What's going on here? Help me.
Okay, so on top of my head, one of the things I can think of is if you don't think that activity is going to affect a lot of change, then you might as well not do it. But I want to push back a little on that. That is also because of the kind of democracy we've been brought up to accept and understand. Yeah. So I used to make a joke with my friends that for a long time, I understood democracy like how we say it in Tree. Kabi mamin kabi. It means you can just talk your mind.
I tell you.
And that's what democracy is. But then, of course, democracy is beyond that once in 4 years activity. I think if we were made to understand that there is more you can do as a citizen that would affect the change you want to see beyond voting. If we know in a community we could sit with our assemblyman like I'm sitting with you right now, an opportunity we don't get. If we are empowered to do that, if we're empowered to come up with something and be able to sit with the adults about it and discuss it, and be treated as though we also have something to contribute, I think that would make us want to be involved more. But then, if we see it as after every 4 years, people are coming to come around and solicit for our votes, and that is all they think we can give them, I think naturally there will be...
wow.
Yeah.
No, I love this. Amma, put your hands together for Irama. This is the Ashesi City Dialogue. We're coming to you live from the Hive here at Ashesi Brekusu. My name is Bernard Avle. We're discussing 4 key themes: scholarship, citizenship, leadership, and nation building. My partner, Bridget Jobanuku, who is a feisty citizen, Kojo Pumpuni Asante, CDD, and of course, Dr. Mami Mensah Bonsu, who teaches here, and Amma Irama Sam, who is our citizen.